You can buy steak, Mr. Whitmore, but not kindness, Lily Thompson declares, her voice steady yet piercing, silencing the opulent dining room of Lumière as she faces the venomous disdain of billionaire Sebastian Whitmore. This electrifying moment, charged with courage and defiance, is the heart of a story that will leave you breathless. Where are you tuning in from today? Perhaps you're in New York, Paris, or somewhere across the globe. Let us know in the comments and share your predictions about how this clash unfolds. Will Lily's bravery spark a movement, or will Sebastian's power crush her spirit? Dive into this gripping tale of dignity and resilience, and don't miss out on more inspiring stories. Subscribe to our channel for the latest videos, and join the conversation by sharing your thoughts below. What surprises await in this battle of heart versus wealth? The Heir and Lumière, Paris's crown jewel of fine dining, shimmered with the soft glow of crystal chandeliers, their light dancing across polished silverware and pristine white tablecloths. The clink of wine glasses and the murmur of cultured conversation wove a tapestry of elegance, a sanctuary for the city's elite. Waiters glided like shadows, their movements precise, their smiles practiced. At the heart of this opulent scene, a single table in the VIP corner commanded attention, its occupant a figure of almost mythical allure. Sebastian Whitmore, a billionaire with golden hair and a face carved for magazine covers, sat with an air of unchallenged authority. His tailored navy suit gleamed under the chandelier's glow, every stitch a testament to his wealth. Yet his piercing blue eyes held a storm waiting to break. Across from him, a nervous business associate fidgeted, while two burly bodyguards loomed nearby, their presence a silent warning. Then, like a thunderclap in a clear sky, the storm arrived. Sebastian shot to his feet, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor, shattering the restaurant's delicate harmony. Every head turned, forks paused mid-bite, and the pianist's fingers froze above the keys. His gaze locked onto Lily Thompson, a young black waitress whose beauty was as striking as her quiet grace. Her deep brown eyes, usually warm with kindness, now flickered with a trace of fear as she stood before him, silver tray clutched tightly in her hands. Her black and white uniform, crisp and professional, seemed suddenly fragile against the weight of Sebastian's contempt. "I don't understand," he boomed, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "How a place like Lumière can have someone like you serving me." Each word dripped with venom, laced with a disdain that made the air feel heavier, colder. Gasps rippled through the dining room, soft but sharp, as diners exchanged glances of shock and unease. Lily stood rooted to the spot, her knuckles whitening around the tray. She was no stranger to prejudice, having grown up in the gritty outskirts of Paris where sidelong glances and whispered slights were as common as the morning mist. But this was different, a public assault, raw and unfiltered, from a man whose wealth could crush lives with a single phone call. Her heart pounded, each beat a drumroll of dread, yet she fought to keep her composure. The weight of every eye in Lumière pressed down on her, from the elderly couple in the corner, their faces creased with concern, to the young woman in a red silk dress, whispering to her companion. No one spoke. No one dared. The silence was a living thing, suffocating and electric, as if the room itself held its breath, waiting for what would come next. Sebastian's eyes swept over Lily, cold and appraising, as if she were an object unworthy of his table. "I came here for a world-class experience," he continued, his voice rising, each syllable a calculated jab. "Not some cheap display of diversity." The word diversity landed like a slap, its implication clear to every soul in the room. A low murmur stirred among the diners, a mix of outrage and discomfort, but still, no one intervened. The pianist remained silent, his hands hovering over the keys, and even the manager, Monsieur Laurent, stood frozen at the edge of the scene, his face pale with indecision. Lily's chest tightened, her breath shallow, as the weight of Sebastian's words bore down on her. She had faced subtle slights before, the cold shoulders of co-workers, the skeptical glances of patrons, but never this overt, merciless humiliation, broadcast for all to witness. Yet beneath the storm of Sebastian's rage, something stirred within Lily. She thought of her daughter Amara, her 6-year-old beacon of hope, whose bright smile and dreams of becoming a doctor kept Lily pushing through every grueling shift. That image, vivid and fierce, anchored her. Her trembling hands steadied, and though her eyes glistened with unshed tears, she lifted her chin, meeting Sebastian's gaze with a quiet defiance. "Sir," she said, her voice soft but steady, a thread of steel woven through it. "If you have any concerns about my service, I can fetch the manager to address them." The words were polite, measured, but they carried a weight that silenced the room further. A few diners leaned forward, their expressions shifting from pity to admiration, struck by the composure of this young woman under such an onslaught. Sebastian's face flushed a deeper crimson, his jaw tightening as if her calm response was an insult in itself. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a menacing hiss, though loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I don't need the manager," he spat. "I want you gone. You're an embarrassment to a place like this." His finger jabbed toward her, a gesture of pure contempt, and the air seemed to crackle with the intensity of his scorn. Lily's heart raced, but she held her ground, her dark eyes unwavering. The tray in her hands felt like a shield, inadequate yet vital as she stood against the billionaire's wrath. The dining room remained a frozen tableau, every gaze fixed on the confrontation, the tension so thick it could choke. For a moment, it seemed the world hung on the edge of something irreversible. In that charged silence, Lily felt the weight of her dignity, a fragile but unyielding force. She knew who Sebastian Whitmore was, a man whose name opened doors and closed futures. Yet in this moment, she was more than a waitress. She was a mother, a survivor, a woman who refused to be diminished. The storm had broken, but it had not broken her. As Sebastian glared, awaiting her collapse, Lily stood tall, her resolve a quiet fire. The diners watched, some with sympathy, others with awe, sensing that this was no ordinary moment. It was the spark of something greater, though none could yet name it. For now the battle was here, in the heart of Lumière, and Lily Thompson was not backing down. In the dim glow of a cracked street lamp outside her modest apartment in the Paris suburbs, Lily Thompson sat on a worn couch, her hands cradling a chipped mug of chamomile tea. The world beyond her window was a symphony of distant sirens and the soft hum of a city that never fully slept, but inside her thoughts were a tempest of memories and resolve. The confrontation with Sebastian Whitmore at Lumière lingered like a bruise, but it was not the billionaire's venom that defined her. It was the life she had clawed her way through, a tapestry of struggle and unyielding hope, woven for the sake of her 6-year-old daughter Amara. Lily's dark eyes, usually bright with quiet strength, now traced the outlines of a life shaped by hardship, each scar a testament to her refusal to break. Lily had grown up in the shadow of Paris's glittering skyline, in a neighborhood where crumbling tenements and narrow alleys whispered of forgotten dreams. The daughter of Haitian immigrants, she had known prejudice as intimately as her own shadow. As a child, she endured classmates' taunts, their words sharp as glass, mocking her skin, her hair, her very existence. Teachers, too, had doubted her, their lowered expectations a silent cage. Yet Lily's spirit burned bright, fueled by her parents' tireless labor, her father a janitor, her mother a seamstress, who poured every ounce of their strength into giving their children a chance at more. Education, they told her, was the key to rewriting her fate. Lily clung to that promise, graduating high school with honors, her heart set on becoming a dancer, her body moving with a grace that seemed to defy the world's weight. But life, as it so often does, had other plans. At 20, Lily found herself pregnant, abandoned by a boyfriend who vanished at the first whisper of responsibility. The news hit her like a storm, and the judgment from her community was relentless. Neighbors whispered, their words laced with scorn, branding her a failure before her child was even born. Yet Lily refused to let their cruelty define her or her unborn daughter. When Amara arrived, a tiny bundle with eyes that mirrored her own, Lily's world shifted. Holding her daughter for the first time, she felt a fierce, unshakable resolve. Amara deserved a life free from the shadows of poverty and prejudice, and Lily would fight for it, no matter the cost. Every sleepless night, every aching muscle, every tear shed in secret was for her little girl, whose dreams of becoming a doctor lit a fire in Lily's heart. To provide for Amara, Lily took every job she could find. She waited tables at dingy cafes, scrubbed floors in office buildings under the cover of night, and washed laundry by hand for wealthier families. Each dollar earned was a brick in the foundation she was building for her daughter. But the bills piled higher than her hopes, and old debts loomed like specters. Worse still were the daily slights, the unspoken but palpable prejudice that followed her and Amara. At just 6, Amara had already faced classmates who shunned her for her skin color, their rejection leaving her in tears that broke Lily's heart. Those moments when she found her daughter crying in their cramped bedroom were a dagger to her soul. Yet they also forged her determination. Amara would not live the life Lily had. She would know a world where her worth was unquestioned. The opportunity to work at Lumière had been a rare beacon of hope. The restaurant, a bastion of Parisian elegance, was known for its ruthless standards, and for a black woman like Lily to secure a position, there was nothing short of miraculous. From her first day, she understood the stakes. She would have to work twice as hard, shine twice as bright, to earn a fraction of the respect her colleagues took for granted. She arrived hours early, her uniform pressed to perfection, her memory sharp with every detail of the menu, from the origin of each wine to the intricacies of each dish. She rehearsed her service routine in front of a cracked mirror, her voice steady as she practiced greetings and recommendations. Lumière was more than a job. It was a lifeline, a chance to give Amara the future Lily had once dreamed of for herself. Yet the reality of Lumière was a daily battle. Her white colleagues, with their easy camaraderie, often fell silent when she entered the break room, their laughter replaced by curt nods or averted glances. Some patrons, too, eyed her with skepticism when she approached their tables, their expressions questioning her place in such an exclusive space. Lily absorbed these slights, burying the hurt beneath her professional smile, but each one was a weight added to her already heavy load. She had learned to navigate the unspoken rules of prejudice, to let the whispers and stares slide off her like rain. But Sebastian Whitmore's outburst had been no whisper. It was a roar, a public assault that struck at the core of her identity. It wasn't just about her service. It was about her very right to exist in a place like Lumière. As she sat in her apartment, the memory of Sebastian's words, "Someone like you," echoed in her mind, each syllable a reminder of the world's cruelty. Yet Lily's thoughts turned to Amara, asleep in the next room, her small chest rising and falling, with the peace only a child could know. That image was her anchor, her reason to endure. She thought of the times Amara had come home from school, her eyes bright with stories of science lessons, her voice bubbling with dreams of healing people. Those dreams were Lily's North Star, guiding her through the darkness of doubt and fear. She had fought too hard, sacrificed too much, to let a man like Sebastian Whitmore dim her light or her daughter's future. Lily set her mug down, her hands steady now, and rose from the couch. She walked to Amara's room, pausing at the door to watch her daughter sleep. In that quiet moment, she made a silent vow. No matter how fierce the storm, she would not let it break her. She was more than a waitress, more than the target of a billionaire's scorn. She was a mother, a survivor, a woman whose strength had been forged in the fires of adversity. The battle at Lumière was far from over, but Lily Thompson was ready to face it, armed with the unbreakable love she held for her daughter and the unyielding belief that her worth could not be diminished by anyone, no matter how powerful. The dining room of Lumière pulsed with an undercurrent of tension, the kind that hums just beneath the surface of polished elegance. The crystal chandeliers cast their golden glow, but the air felt charged, as if the restaurant itself sensed the impending clash. Waiters moved with practiced grace, their steps a silent choreography, while the clink of silverware and the murmur of refined conversation filled the space. At the VIP table, Sebastian Whitmore sat like a king on his throne, his golden hair catching the light, his sharp features set in a mask of imperious disdain. His associate, a wiry man named Victor, fidgeted with his napkin while two bodyguards stood like sentinels, their eyes scanning the room. Lily Thompson, her heart a steady drumbeat of resolve, navigated her tables with the poise of a dancer, Her black and white uniform a crisp armor against the subtle slights she endured daily. But tonight, fate was about to deal her an unforeseen blow. The evening had been unfolding smoothly until a sudden crash shattered the restaurant's delicate harmony. In the kitchen, Julian, the server assigned to Sebastian's table, slipped on a stray lemon wedge, his tray of champagne flutes exploding into a cascade of glass and fizz. The sound echoed like a gunshot, drawing every eye to the swinging kitchen doors. Julian crumpled to the floor, clutching his ankle, his face twisted in pain. Shards of crystal glittered around him, a sparkling wreckage that mirrored the chaos about to descend. Monsieur Laurent, the manager, rushed to his side, his face draining of color as he realized the gravity of the situation. Julien was Lumiere's most seasoned server, handpicked for Sebastian's demanding table. Now, with the billionaire's icy gaze already chilling the room, Laurent's eyes darted frantically, searching for a solution. "Lily," Laurent called, his voice a mix of urgency and reluctance, as he caught her in the corridor just beyond the dining room. "You'll have to take over Julian's table for Mr. Whitmore tonight. There's no one else." The words hit Lily like a physical force, her breath catching in her throat. Her dark eyes widened, a flicker of dread passing through them, but she masked it quickly. She knew who Sebastian Whitmore was, a man whose wealth and influence could bend the world to his will, and whose disdain for people like her was no secret. Serving him was a task fraught with peril, especially after his earlier outburst. Yet refusal was not an option. Lumiere's reputation and her livelihood hung in the balance. She thought of Amara, her daughter's bright smile a beacon in her mind, and nodded. "Understood, Monsieur Laurent," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing within. "I'll do my very best." Lily smoothed her uniform, each motion a ritual to steady her nerves, and took a deep breath. The weight of the moment pressed against her chest, but she drew strength from the image of Amara, her 6-year-old daughter who believed in her mother's unbreakable spirit. Stepping back into the dining room, she felt the eyes of the staff and diners follow her, a silent audience to her impending trial. Sebastian's table loomed like a battlefield, its pristine tablecloth and gleaming silverware a stark contrast to the hostility she anticipated. As she approached, Sebastian's gaze snapped to her, his blue eyes cold and appraising, a sneer curling his lips before she even spoke. The air around him seemed to thicken with his arrogance, and Lily felt a shiver run down her spine, though she refused to let it show. "Good evening, Mr. Whitmore," she said, her voice calm and professional, each word carefully measured. "My name is Lily Thompson, and I'll be taking care of you tonight." Her smile was polite, a shield against the contempt she saw in his expression. Sebastian leaned back in his chair, his posture that of a predator sizing up its prey. He tilted his head, his golden hair glinting, and his voice dripped with condescension. "Fine," he said, drawing out the word as if granting her a favor. "I hope you know what you're doing, because I hate having to repeat myself." The words were a gauntlet thrown down, a challenge laced with the unspoken assumption that she was unfit for the task. Victor, his associate, shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze, while the bodyguards remained stone-faced, their presence a silent threat. Lily's heart pounded, but she held her ground, her dark eyes meeting Sebastian's without flinching. She had faced prejudice before, whispers in the break room, skeptical glances from patrons. But this was different. Sebastian's disdain was a blade, sharp and deliberate, aimed not just at her service, but at her very existence in this space. She felt the weight of every eye in the dining room, from the elderly couple watching with concern to the young woman in red, her whisper to her companion barely audible. The tension was palpable, a tightrope stretched taut, and Lily knew one misstep could unravel everything. Yet she refused to let fear take root. She thought of Amara, her daughter's dreams of a brighter future, and that thought was a fire in her chest, burning away doubt. "May I start you with something to drink, sir?" she asked, her tone unwavering, her posture perfect. Sebastian's sneer deepened, as if her professionalism was an affront. "We'll see if you can manage that much," and he replied, his voice low but cutting, designed to sting. Lily nodded, her smile unshaken, and turned to fetch the wine list, her steps deliberate despite the tremor in her hands. The dining room seemed to hold its breath, the other diners' gazes lingering, some with pity, others with curiosity. She could feel Sebastian's eyes boring into her back, a test of her resilience. This was no ordinary shift. It was a crucible, one that would demand every ounce of her strength. As she moved toward the sommelier station, Lily steeled herself, knowing that serving Sebastian Whitmore would be the greatest challenge she had ever faced. But for Amara, for her dignity, she would not falter. The dining room of Lumière thrummed with a quiet intensity, its elegance a fragile veneer over the storm brewing at Sebastian Whitmore's VIP table. The chandeliers cast their golden glow, but the light seemed to bend around the billionaire, his presence a dark gravity pulling every glance his way. Lily Thompson moved through the space with the grace of a tightrope walker, her every step measured, her black and white uniform a crisp shield against the hostility she faced. Her dark eyes, usually warm with kindness, now held a guarded resolve as she served Sebastian's table, where he sat like a predator, toying with his prey. His golden hair glinted, his sharp features twisted into a smirk that promised trouble. Victor, his associate, kept his eyes on his plate while the two bodyguards stood like statues, their silence amplifying the tension. Lily knew this night was a gauntlet, and each moment tested her endurance. As she presented a bottle of Chateau Lafite Rothschild, its label gleaming under the soft light, Sebastian leaned forward, his fingers drumming on the table. "I'm rather surprised you know how to open a bottle properly," he said, his voice a velvet blade, smooth yet cutting. "Lumière must have invested a great deal in training someone like you." The words landed like a whip, their implication clear to the nearby diners, who glanced over with uneasy expressions. Lily's hands, steady as she poured the wine, betrayed a faint tremor, but she forced a polite smile. "Sir, I've been trained as thoroughly as every server here," she replied, her tone calm but laced with a quiet defiance. The act of pouring was mechanical, her training a lifeline, but each word from Sebastian was a stone added to the weight on her shoulders. The billionaire's eyes narrowed, his smirk widening as if her professionalism was a personal affront. "We'll see about that," he said, leaning back with a theatrical sigh. "I've dined in the finest establishments, London, Tokyo, Dubai, and I've rarely seen someone like you allowed to serve in places like this." His words, though spoken softly, carried across the hushed dining room, drawing sharp intakes of breath from nearby tables. A woman in a sapphire gown whispered to her companion, her eyes flickering with sympathy, while an older gentleman adjusted his glasses, his frown deepening. Lily felt the stares like pinpricks, each one a reminder of her precarious place in this world of wealth and privilege. Yet she held her ground, her smile unwavering, as she set the bottle down with a precision that belied the storm within. When she returned with the appetizer, a delicate arrangement of seared scallops, Sebastian's gaze was waiting, sharp and predatory. "I do hope you won't drop anything," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. "I've had clumsy servers like you ruin entire dinners before." The words were a calculated jab, meant to humiliate, and they hit their mark. Lily's heart thudded, a mix of anger and shame rising in her chest. But she placed the plate before him with care, her hands steady despite the heat creeping up her neck. "I promise you, sir, you will not be disappointed," she said, her voice a soft but firm counterpoint to his cruelty. A few diners glanced over, their expressions a mix of awkward concern and silent admiration, but none spoke up. The silence was a weight, pressing down on Lily as she navigated the tightrope of her duties. Sebastian's assaults continued, each one a fresh cut. He criticized the crispness of his napkin fold, the cadence of her menu descriptions, the angle of his wine glass, petty details laced with the unspoken message that her failure was inevitable, tied not to her skill, but to her identity. "This is why I insist on servers who are a better fit," he murmured to Victor, loud enough for Lily to hear as she cleared an empty plate. "They can't even handle the basics. It's disgraceful that Lumière stoops to this diversity stunt." Victor shifted uncomfortably, his eyes fixed on the tablecloth, unwilling to engage. The bodyguards remained impassive, their presence a constant reminder of Sebastian's power. Lily's breath caught, her fingers tightening around the plate, but she refused to let his words break her. She thought of Amara, her daughter's bright eyes and boundless dreams, and that image was a shield against the billionaire's venom. Stepping back to the kitchen to fetch the next course, Lily leaned against the wall, her heart racing. The cool tile was a brief respite, a moment to gather herself. She could still hear Sebastian's voice, his words echoing like a drumbeat of disdain. Everything in her wanted to falter, to let the tears burning behind her eyes spill over. But she knew that was what he craved, a display of weakness to justify his cruelty. She smoothed her uniform, her hands trembling, and took a slow, steadying breath. The kitchen bustled around her, a cacophony of clanging pans and shouted orders. But it felt distant, as if she were alone in her battle. She was not just a server, she was a mother, a survivor, a woman who had fought too hard to let a man like Sebastian Whitmore unravel her. Returning to the dining room, Lily felt the weight of every gaze, from the staff who avoided her eyes to the diners who watched with a mix of pity and curiosity. She approached Sebastian's table with the next course, her posture perfect, her smile a mask of professionalism. His smirk greeted her, a challenge renewed. "Let's see if you can manage this without embarrassing yourself," he said, his tone light but laced with malice. Lily set the plate down, her movements deliberate, her voice steady as she described the dish. The dining room seemed to hold its breath, the tension a living thing, coiling tighter with each exchange. She knew this was more than a test of her service. It was a test of her spirit, her right to stand in this space. For Amara, for her dignity, Lily would not yield. The night was far from over, and the pressure was mounting, but she was a flame that refused to be extinguished. The dining room of Lumière was a stage set for a silent war, its opulent glow dimmed by the storm brewing at Sebastian Whitmore's VIP table. The clink of crystal and the murmur of hushed conversations had faded to a tense hush, as if the restaurant itself held its breath. Lily Thompson, her black and white uniform a stark contrast to the chaos in her heart, approached Sebastian's table with a plate of Wagyu steak, its aroma rich and tantalizing. Her dark eyes, usually alight with warmth, were now a fortress of resolve, guarding against the billionaire's relentless disdain. Sebastian sat with the ease of a king, his golden hair catching the chandelier's light, his sharp features twisted into a smirk that promised another assault. His associate, Victor, stared at his plate while the two bodyguards loomed like shadows, their presence a constant reminder of power. Every step Lily took felt like crossing a battlefield, the weight of every gaze in the room pressing against her. She set the plate before Sebastian with a grace honed by countless hours of practice, her hands steady despite the tremor threatening to betray her. "Sir, here is the Wagyu steak you requested," she said, her voice soft but clear, a thread of steel woven through it. "I hope you enjoy it." Sebastian's eyes flicked to the dish, then back to her, his smirk widening into something cruel, almost theatrical. He leaned forward, his voice carrying just enough to reach the nearby tables, ensuring his words would wound publicly. "You know, Lily," he said, drawing out her name as if it were an insult, "I've given this a lot of thought. You really don't belong here." The words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate, slicing through the silence. Lumière must be so desperate to appear diverse that they're hiring people who clearly aren't qualified just to please the public. The dining room froze, the air thick with shock. A woman in a sapphire gown gasped softly, her hand pausing mid-reach for her wine glass. An elderly couple exchanged a troubled glance, their forks abandoned on their plates. The pianist, who had resumed playing after earlier disruptions, let a single note linger, then stopped, his fingers hovering above the keys. Lily felt her heart lurch, a tidal wave of anger and shame crashing within her. Sebastian's words were not just an attack on her service, but on her very existence. A public declaration that her presence in this sacred space of elegance was a mistake. Her knuckles whitened around the edge of her tray, the silver cool against her skin, but her face remained a mask of composure, her training a lifeline in the storm. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink to the space between them. Sebastian's icy blue eyes locked on hers, daring her to crumble, and Lily's steady gaze refusing to yield. The weight of the room's attention was suffocating, every diner and staff member a witness to this crucible. She could feel the pity in some glances, the curiosity in others. But none spoke, none dared to interrupt the billionaire's tirade. Her chest tightened, each breath a struggle, as memories of past slights, whispers in the break room, skeptical looks from patrons, flashed through her mind. But then, like a beacon cutting through fog, the image of her daughter Amara appeared. Her 6-year-old's bright smile, her dreams of healing the world, ignited a spark within Lily, a fire that refused to be doused. Something inside her snapped awake, a quiet but fierce resolve that surged through her veins. She straightened her posture, her shoulders squaring as if shedding an invisible weight. Her dark eyes, glistening with unshed tears, met Sebastian's head-on, unyielding. The room seemed to tilt, the silence deepening as she spoke, her voice clear and unwavering, ringing out for all to hear. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, each word a deliberate step into the fray, "you can buy a piece of steak, but you cannot buy kindness." The sentence landed like a thunderclap, shattering the oppressive quiet. It was simple, yet potent, a truth that cut through Sebastian's arrogance like a blade. The dining room held its breath, every eye wide, every heart paused in awe or disbelief. Sebastian froze, his face flushing crimson, his usual composure fracturing under the weight of her words. His mouth opened, then closed, as if the air had been stolen from him. For a fleeting moment, his icy confidence wavered, replaced by a flicker of fury and confusion. Victor, his associate, went pale, his eyes darting to the tablecloth, while the bodyguards shifted slightly, their stoic masks betraying a hint of unease. Nearby diners leaned forward, some with jaws dropped, others with faint smiles of admiration. The woman in the sapphire gown clutched her companion's hand, her eyes bright with respect. The elderly couple nodded faintly, as if witnessing something sacred. Even the pianist remained silent, the absence of music amplifying the power of Lily's retort. Lily held Sebastian's gaze, her heart pounding, but her resolve unshaken. She knew the risk of her words, the audacity of challenging a man whose wealth could crush her world. Yet in that moment, she was more than a waitress. She was a mother, a survivor, a woman reclaiming her dignity. The silence stretched, electric and taut, as Sebastian's shock gave way to rage. He slammed his hands on the table, the clatter of his plate echoing in the stillness. "What did you just say to me?" he roared, his voice a raw edge of fury. But Lily stood firm, her tray a shield, her eyes afire. The dining room was a frozen tableau, every soul captivated by the courage of a woman who dared to speak truth to power, her words a spark that threatened to ignite something far greater. The air in Lumière crackled with the aftershock of Lily Thompson's defiant words, her voice still echoing in the stunned silence that gripped the dining room. The chandeliers above cast their golden glow, but the lights seemed to falter, as if dimmed by the weight of the moment. Sebastian Whitmore, his face a mask of crimson fury, stood frozen at his VIP table, his hands clenched into fists on the pristine tablecloth. The Wagyu steak before him sat untouched, a silent witness to the clash that had just erupted. Lily stood tall, her black and white uniform a stark contrast to the chaos swirling within her, her dark eyes locked on Sebastian's, unyielding despite the storm of his rage. The diners around them were statues, their gazes a mix of shock, sympathy, and awe, while the staff hovered at the edges, caught between fear and admiration. The silence was a living thing, heavy and electric, as if the restaurant itself awaited the billionaire's next move. Sebastian's voice broke the stillness, a low growl that rose to a roar. "How dare you speak to me like that?" he bellowed, slamming his hands on the table, sending his wineglass teetering. "Do you know who I am? You'll regret this, I promise you." His words were a venomous vow, each syllable dripping with the authority of a man accustomed to bending the world to his will. He pointed a trembling finger at Lily, his blue eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to scorch the air. Victor, his associate, shrank back, his face pale, while the two bodyguards stepped closer, their movements a subtle threat. Lily's heart pounded, a drumbeat of dread, but she held her ground, her tray clutched like a shield, her expression calm despite the tremor in her hands. She knew the weight of her defiance, the risk of challenging a man whose influence could shatter her life. Without another word, Sebastian spun on his heel, his tailored suit a blur of navy as he stormed toward the exit. His bodyguards flanked him, their heavy steps echoing on the hardwood floor, while Victor scrambled to follow, casting a fleeting, apologetic glance at Lily. The heavy glass doors of Lumière slammed shut behind them, the sound reverberating like a gavel strike. The dining room exhaled, the tension breaking into a murmur of whispers and shifting chairs. Some diners leaned toward their companions, their voices low but urgent, while others sat in stunned silence, their eyes still fixed on Lily. A few slipped out quietly, their checks settled in haste, as if eager to escape the aftermath of such a confrontation. The pianist resumed a soft melody, but the notes felt tentative, a fragile attempt to restore normalcy. Lily remained rooted in place, her breath shallow, the weight of what had just transpired pressing against her chest. She felt the eyes of the room on her, a mix of pity, curiosity, and something new. Respect. A middle-aged woman in a velvet dress rose from a nearby table, her steps deliberate as she approached. Her hand rested gently on Lily's arm, her voice warm with sincerity. "My dear, your courage was extraordinary," she said, her eyes glistening. "Not many would stand up to a man like that." Lily blinked, her throat tight, and managed a shaky nod. "Thank you," she whispered, the words catching as the woman's kindness pierced the armor she had built against the night's ordeal. The woman squeezed her arm before returning to her seat, her companion nodding in agreement. One by one, others followed. An elderly gentleman with a silver cane approached, his voice steady but kind. "You did the right thing," he said. "Don't let anyone make you feel less than you are." A young couple, their faces alight with admiration, added, "We're with you. That took real strength." Each word was a balm, soothing the raw ache in Lily's heart, but the fear lingered. She knew who Sebastian Whitmore was, a billionaire whose influence stretched across Paris, a man who could ruin her with a single call. The small life she had built for herself and her daughter, Amara, hung in the balance, and the weight of that reality threatened to crush her fleeting sense of triumph. Monsieur Laurent, the manager, hurried to her side, his face ashen, his usual composure frayed. He steered her toward a quiet corner near the bar, his voice low but urgent. "Lily, do you realize what you've done?" he said, his eyes wide with panic. "You stood up to Sebastian Whitmore. He could have you fired with one phone call. Worse, he could blacklist you from every restaurant in the city." His words were a cold splash of reality, confirming the danger she had sensed in Sebastian's threats. Lily's hands gripped her uniform, her fingers trembling, but her gaze remained steady. "I'm sorry, Monsieur Laurent," she said quietly, her voice laced with resolve. "I couldn't stay silent, not after what he said." Laurent sighed, his expression torn between fear and admiration. "I know you're right," he admitted, glancing at the still watchful diners. "But the world isn't fair, Lily. He won't let this go." Lily nodded, her throat tight with gratitude and dread. Laurent's concern was genuine, but his warning underscored the precariousness of her situation. She thought of Amara, her daughter's innocent smile, her dreams of becoming a doctor, and the life Lily had fought so hard to provide. The thought of losing her job, of failing Amara, sent a chill through her, but she refused to let fear consume her. "I understand," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But are we to bow to men like him forever?" Laurent looked at her, his eyes softening, but he had no answer. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, a silent promise of support, though his face betrayed his worry. The dining room slowly returned to life, the murmur of conversation resuming, but the atmosphere was changed, charged with the echo of Lily's courage. The staff moved with a new wariness, their glances toward her a mix of respect and concern. Diners lingered over their meals, their whispers now centered on the young waitress who had dared to defy a titan. Lily felt the weight of their gazes, a strange mix of vulnerability and strength. She had crossed a line she never thought she would, and though fear gnawed at her, a quiet pride flickered within. For the first time, she had not bowed to injustice, and that small victory, fragile as it was, burned bright in her heart. The morning sun filtered through the heavy curtains of Lumière, casting a soft glow over the empty dining room, its tables bare and chairs neatly aligned, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous night. The chandeliers hung silent, their light dimmed, as if the restaurant itself was catching its breath after the storm of Sebastian Whitmore's departure. Lily Thompson stood at the staff entrance, her heart a tangle of nerves and resolve, her black and white uniform pressed to perfection despite the sleepless hours that had followed her confrontation. Her dark eyes, usually bright with quiet strength, were shadowed with unease, the weight of Sebastian's threats, "You'll regret this," echoing like a relentless drumbeat. Yet as she stepped into the familiar space, a new energy pulsed through the air, a whisper of something extraordinary waiting to unfold. Before she could reach the break room, Monsieur Laurent intercepted her, his face a mix of urgency and a rare spark of excitement. "Lily, Madame Dubois wants to see you immediately," he said, his voice low but charged. "She's called an emergency meeting in the conference room. Everyone's waiting." Lily's stomach tightened, a surge of anxiety gripping her. Had Sebastian's influence already reached the restaurant's owner? She nodded, smoothing her uniform as if to steady herself, and followed Laurent down the polished hallway. The conference room door loomed ahead, its heavy wood a barrier between her and an uncertain fate. As she entered, the sight that greeted her stopped her breath. Every member of Lumière's staff, servers, cooks, sommeliers, and senior managers, sat around the long table, their faces turned toward her, not with the usual cold distance, but with a warmth that felt almost tangible. At the head of the table stood Madame Claire Dubois, Lumière's formidable owner, a woman whose elegance and sharp intellect commanded respect in Paris's culinary world. Her silver hair was swept into a chignon, her eyes piercing yet kind as they settled on Lily. The room fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. "I'm sure you all know why we're here," Madame Dubois began, her voice clear and commanding, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Last night, our restaurant witnessed an unacceptable act of prejudice directed at one of our own, Lily Thompson." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle, her gaze sweeping the room before returning to Lily. "Let me be clear. Lumière stands for excellence, integrity, and respect. We will not tolerate discrimination, no matter how powerful the source." The room erupted in applause, a wave of sound that washed over Lily, startling her with its intensity. She stood frozen, her heart pounding, as colleagues who had once offered her only curt nods now looked at her with eyes full of solidarity. A senior chef, his face weathered from years in the kitchen, gave her a nod of respect. A young server, who had often avoided her in the break room, offered a shy smile. Madame Dubois raised a hand, silencing the room, her voice softening but no less resolute. "Lily, you are not alone. This team, this restaurant stands with you. No one, not even Sebastian Whitmore, has the right to demean our staff." Her words were a lifeline, pulling Lily from the edge of fear into a fragile but growing sense of belonging. Lily's throat tightened, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "Thank you, Madame Dubois," she said, her voice trembling but sincere. "I was afraid my actions might harm Lumière, but I couldn't stay silent." Madame Dubois smiled, a rare warmth softening her features. "You've done more than stand up for yourself, Lily. You've reminded us what this restaurant truly stands for." She turned to the staff, her voice rising with conviction. "From this moment, let Lumière be a beacon of dignity where every person is valued, no matter their background." The room burst into applause again, hands clapping, voices murmuring in agreement, a collective strength that wrapped around Lily like a shield. As the meeting ended, colleagues approached her, their gestures tentative but genuine. A cook squeezed her shoulder, whispering, "You're one of us, Lily. Stay strong." A server, her eyes bright, added, "We're proud of you." Each word was a spark, igniting a fire within Lily that she hadn't realized had been smoldering. She had spent so long feeling like an outsider, her presence questioned, her worth doubted. Now for the first time, she felt seen, not as a symbol of difference, but as a vital part of Lumière's heart. Yet beneath the warmth, a shadow lingered. Sebastian's threats were not idle. His influence could reach far beyond this room, threatening the fragile life she had built for her daughter, Amara. As she stepped back into the dining room to prepare for the evening shift, Lily's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen, her breath catching as notifications flooded in, messages, tags, and alerts from social media. A diner had recorded her confrontation with Sebastian, and the video had spread like wildfire across the internet. The hashtag Washish Lily's Courage was trending, with thousands of comments praising her bravery, calling her a beacon of resistance against prejudice. Strangers from across the globe shared stories of their struggles, their words a chorus of solidarity. Yet alongside the support, darker messages lurked, anonymous threats, accusations of troublemaking, echoes of Sebastian's venom. Lily's heart raced, the sudden spotlight both a gift and a burden. She was no longer just a waitress. She was a symbol, her small act of defiance rippling far beyond the walls of Lumière. Standing beneath the chandeliers, Lily felt the weight of this new reality. The restaurant, once a battleground, now felt like a sanctuary, its staff her unexpected allies. She thought of Amara, her daughter's dreams of a brighter future, and the fire within her burned brighter. The world was watching, and though the path ahead was uncertain, Lily knew she had sparked something unstoppable. The flame of her courage was spreading, and no amount of wealth or power could extinguish it. The grand ballroom of Lumière shimmered with an almost sacred glow, its crystal chandeliers casting prisms of light across a sea of elegantly dressed guests. The air buzzed with anticipation, a symphony of clinking glasses and fervent whispers as activists, business leaders, and dignitaries gathered for the launch of Project Fairness. The once familiar dining room, where Lily Thompson had faced her darkest moment, was transformed into a stage for hope, its tables draped in white linen and adorned with candles that flickered like stars. Lily stood backstage, her heart pounding, her hands smoothing the simple yet elegant black dress Madame Dubois had insisted she wear. Her dark eyes, usually a fortress of quiet strength, shimmered with a mix of nerves and resolve. The weight of her new role as the face of a movement pressed against her, but the memory of her daughter Amara anchored her, a beacon guiding her through the storm. As she stepped toward the podium, the crowd's murmurs softened, their eyes turning to her with a reverence that felt both humbling and overwhelming. Madame Dubois stood at the stage's edge, her silver hair gleaming, her nod a silent vow of support. Beside her was Barack Obama, his presence a quiet force, his warm smile a reminder of the extraordinary path that had led Lily here. The applause swelled, a wave of sound that enveloped her, carrying her forward. She gripped the microphone, her breath steadying as she surveyed the room. Hundreds of faces, each one a testament to the ripple her courage had created. "Tonight," she began, her voice clear and resonant, "I returned to the place where a small but profound moment changed my life. Right here, I stood up against discrimination, defending the one value I hold dearest, the dignity of every human being." The room hung on her words, the silence between them as powerful as the speech itself. Lily's voice, though soft, carried a fire that captivated every soul. "I never imagined that one act of resistance could spark such change," she continued, her eyes scanning the crowd, connecting with strangers who felt like allies. "In these past days, I've seen both the best and worst of humanity, bravery and empathy on one side, prejudice and hatred on the other. But I've learned that kindness and dignity are the strongest forces we have." Her words were a clarion call, each syllable infused with the authenticity of a woman who had lived the pain she described. The audience leaned forward, some nodding, others wiping tears, as her story wove a thread of unity through the room. Lily paused, her gaze settling on Madame Dubois, whose eyes shone with pride, and Obama, who nodded encouragingly, his faith in her palpable. "Tonight, I'm honored to introduce Project Fairness," she said, her voice rising with conviction. "A program to protect the rights of vulnerable workers, especially within the Black community, and to combat racism in the workplace." The room erupted in applause, a thunderous affirmation that shook the chandeliers. She raised a hand, her expression softening but resolute. "I've asked myself, can the courage of one ordinary person make a difference? The answer is yes. A single act of kindness and bravery can move millions, igniting a wave of change stronger than any authority." Her words landed like a spark in dry grass, setting the room ablaze with emotion as many rose to their feet, their ovation a tribute to her unbreakable spirit. Yet even in this moment of triumph, the shadow of Sebastian Whitmore loomed. His absence was conspicuous, but Lily knew his influence lingered, his attempts to sabotage Project Fairness whispered about in hushed circles. He had leveraged his wealth to pressure potential partners, his vendetta a dark undercurrent threatening to undermine her work. But the support surrounding her was a fortress. Madame Dubois' unwavering commitment, Obama's guiding presence, in the countless strangers whose messages flooded her phone, calling her a beacon of hope. She thought of Amara, her daughter's dreams of a just world, and that image fueled her resolve. The threats, the hateful messages, the weight of public scrutiny, they were all real, but they paled against the fire of her purpose. As the applause faded, Lily stepped down from the podium, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and responsibility. Madame Dubois approached, her voice warm with emotion. "Lily, you've shown the world that no amount of power can overcome dignity and kindness," she said, her hand resting on Lily's shoulder. Obama joined them, his smile broad and genuine. "You're not just the spokesperson for Project Fairness," he said, his voice steady with conviction. "You are its heart. Together, we'll change the world." Their words were a lifeline, anchoring Lily in the whirlwind of her new reality. She nodded, her eyes glistening, a quiet strength radiating from her as she absorbed the magnitude of her role. The ballroom buzzed with energy as guests mingled, their conversations alive with plans for the movement ahead. Lily stood at the center, no longer just a waitress but a symbol of resilience, her presence drawing people like moths to a flame. Activists shared strategies, business leaders pledged support, and ordinary attendees approached to thank her, their stories of struggle mirroring her own. Yet beneath the celebration, Lily felt the weight of what lay ahead, a path fraught with challenges, from Sebastian's silent machinations to the relentless scrutiny of a world watching her every move. She thought of Amara, asleep in their modest apartment, and vowed to keep fighting, not just for her daughter, but for every soul who had ever felt diminished. As the event drew to a close, Lily stepped outside into the cool Paris night, the city's lights twinkling like stars. The moonlight bathed her in a gentle glow, and she smiled, a quiet peace settling over her. "I don't know what tomorrow holds," she whispered to herself, "but I will always fight for kindness, courage, and the dignity every person deserves." The street was alive with the hum of life, and in that moment, Lily knew her journey had only begun. She was no longer alone. She was a voice for millions, her courage a flame that would burn bright, no matter the storms that awaited. Lily Thompson's story is a powerful reminder that one act of courage can ignite a movement, challenging us all to stand up for dignity and kindness in the face of injustice. What did her journey inspire in you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let us know how her bravery resonates with your own experiences. We're deeply grateful for your time and support in joining us for this unforgettable tale. Subscribe to our channel to catch more stories that uplift and provoke thought, and don't miss the chance to be part of our growing community. Until next time, thank you for listening, and we can't wait to share another inspiring story with you soon.